Welcome everyone to Sharing Soulful Stories. And today I'm here with the beautiful Baxter. Welcome, Baxter.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
You're so welcome. And now I'm just going to tell everyone a little bit more about you. Baxter is a yoga educator and yoga therapist. She travels between Australia and the US, guiding tours, running yoga events, and teaching daily yoga in the park classes in Sorrento, Victoria, overlooking one of the most wonderful settings along that coastline. She recently released an app with guided breath practices to help lower hypertension called Breathtaking. And I know you can get a free download of that on iTunes, and works with individuals as a yoga therapist since completing her postgrad studies in 2014. And this year, Baxter's launched a new health coaching program called Intelligent Health, where she works in collaboration with a naturopath and Chinese medical practitioner to personally assess and guide people over a 3-month period to optimal health, something we're all looking toward. Baxter, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
So today I'm opening up a conversation about spirituality, and I would love to open with the question, what does spirituality mean to you?
Well, Joe, spirituality. I suppose for me, coming from a yoga background, spirituality is an aspect of everyone, of ourselves, of the individual. And just as the physical body is, just as the mental body is, just as the pranic, the energy body is. Because it lies, beyond the mind, you either embrace it or you don't embrace it. And so if you embrace it, you'll have an experience of it of some kind. And if you don't embrace it, then you'll have a different experience of some kind. I think we study the body through exercise and movement, and we study the mind through philosophies. And spirituality is studied through philosophies such as Buddhism or yoga or religion. And so the association of these will either, I think, attract a certain person or not. And so for me, it's recognizing that it exists as an aspect of myself, of everyone. And that it's an interesting aspect to open the door to. Because we're not trained in this culture anyway to embrace it or to even recognize it a lot of the time. Whereas other cultures, if you visit them, like India, for example, it's just commonplace. So for some reason, our culture has resisted the word, just like homosexuality. But I think it will definitely come out of the closet eventually and become more commonplace.
Well, I hope so. I hope that that through this we might even open the door a little crack to a few more people. And so you touched in there on your background being yoga, and I know you have a super interesting story that goes along with that. So could you talk us through how that, and whether other elements or disguises of spirituality are in there as well, but what is your story? Please share.
A story with yoga? Well, prior to my very first class of yoga, I was a sailor. I was working on yachts as a chef in Mallorca and leading the lifestyle of a sailor too. Not minding a drink at the end of the day and a party with the best of them. And when I came back, and there wasn't really space in my life or on the boat, for that matter, to practice yoga, even though I'd heard of it. So when I'd come back on my regular route back from Spain to Australia, I stopped off in Thailand and Laos, and it was in Thailand that there was a note literally nailed to a coconut palm, which said yoga here on the beach tomorrow at 7 a.m. And I thought, well, that's it. I've got the space now to do it in my head and my body and the place, and that I'm going to give it a go. And the teacher that day was incredible. I was the only one there, first of all. So I had this private practice with him, and he literally nailed me. He could analyze me. He could tell me things about myself that I wasn't even aware of. And when I left that class, I felt incredible. I was literally just floating on this cloud all day, and it was nothing I'd ever felt before, ever in my life. So I didn't really have a choice other than to pursue it. I mean, it was just, I guess it opened that door in a way to spirituality. And so it was an experience that I just had to pursue.
Please tell us about, where did it go from there? Where did your experience take you? Because I know some people get that one window of having that floating on the cloud, like, wow, that's what people are talking about. And then you're sort of seeking to get it again. Tell me, where did you go from there?
Well, I think I was lucky. I came back to Adelaide, and a friend of mine introduced me to a teacher there, Albert Henning, who was then in his 70s, and he's still going now. He's sort of well into his 80s. And he's a great spiritualist, actually. So he definitely introduced me to the concepts of spirituality through yoga, through the philosophy of it. And it seemed like a very practical type of philosophy because it was something that you practiced on your body. So I studied with him for a little bit in Adelaide, and then I moved to Victoria. There was a yoga teacher there, but she left town. And so I just started to lead the class that was already in existence. And it was under their support and insistence, really, that I went off and trained, because there were more people wanting to join the group. And they said, well, we can't take anybody else on until you become officially trained. So I went to India, to Shivananda there in Kerala, in Trivandrum, and came back as a yoga teacher to a ready-made class. So it wasn't sort of like today where, you've been trained by the thousands and then being released into the world where there's yoga on every corner, and you really have to become, creative and competitive when it comes to finding an audience or a student body. It was already there for me. And so I had the luxury of being able to sort of develop my style as in my own time, in my own way. And then, sort of obviously trained with other teachers, went to various workshops in Melbourne, invited teachers to us in Mansfield. And then eventually in 2014 I graduated from yoga therapy with a group out of KYM in Chennai, who Yoga Therapy Australia brought out here. And that was a 3-year graduate diploma in yoga therapy, studying with a doctor who taught us the pathology of disease and how to apply the tools of yoga to them, which was a fascinating study. And really for me is where yoga is at, is to work with the individual now as they present to you that day and progress them intelligently to a point where they're stronger than any stressor in their environment, so that they can be at the center of it all, regardless of what's going on, and not be affected by it.
Wow, which I think all of us in some way would love to achieve. So thank you for sharing that yoga can be one way that people can use, that they can find that calm in the middle of the storm sort of space. Would you say, because you've introduced the idea that your first yoga class opened a window to spirituality for you, would you say spirituality has always been part of your life, or that was really the initiation or the first step?
Well, I think it's part of everybody's life. We just don't realize it. So it was certainly the first realization that something existed beyond the mind, because I couldn't explain it. And it was certainly an experience. I think if you've ever had an experience like that, it's something the mind can't really grasp, but once you can't unknow, put it that way. And then either you become afraid of it, or you don't want to know, or you avoid it, or your network doesn't support it. So for many reasons, you choose either to follow the path or you choose not to. For me, I guess I've always walked to the beat of my own drum. So, you know, I wasn't too afraid to pursue it, but in a very practical way, because I'm a very practical person. And I think everyone does that in their own way.
Absolutely. And I feel that by sharing lots of different stories, we're really getting a sense of how that can look for different people. But I would love to hear that you've described yourself as a practical person. How does it look practically for you on a daily basis? Like, how is spirituality weaved into your everyday?
Good question. I think, well, first of all, I teach every day, and that for me is a mindful practice, which I go into the space of, and learning how to connect to myself there and to the spiritual body, and then to be able to sort of just allow that to happen without the mind getting in the way too much, is one of those aspects of my daily life. And then also to practice what I preach. So at the moment, I'm really enjoying the doing and the being aspects, which I'm teaching people how to be in the spaces of the pause between the breaths, and to then encourage people to be in that space without having to fill it, because we have this need now to be busy all the time and to do things all the time. But if you don't do without the support of being, then it's unsustainable. So if we can learn how to be and learn how to rest and value that space just as much as the doing, then the doing is actually born from those spaces, and the doing becomes very practical. And so being a practical person, I love that, because allowing myself just to be and then to see from there what needs to be done, for me, is very efficient. Then I'm not just sort of running around doing all the time. So, you know, I just had 10 days doing a Vipassana retreat in the Blue Mountains up near you lot there in Sydney. And it was my second sitting, and been maybe 14 years between the two sittings of 10 days. And for those of you who haven't heard of Vipassana, it's a 10-day silent retreat where you meditate for about 9 hours a day and in hour-long sittings. And the first thing that you consider is like, wow, I haven't got time for this. You know, I should be doing all of this other stuff. And once I'm in there and you let that go, then when you come out, you become so clear and focused. It's like scrubbing your mind entirely, and all those things that you thought age was bringing about, like forgetfulness and brain fog, and just disappear. And the clarity of mind is, you come out so shiny that your efficiency now to do is, you know, 1,000-fold. I don't know if you can put a number on it, but that to me is a very practical way of being with these practices.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and for touching on some of the way that you teach, because having been to your classes, I love the way that you give us permission to, you know, do the being in the doing. It's just the way you express it, I find I can really connect with. And that even reminded me of, I'm sure I've heard a quote somewhere about the Dalai Lama saying something along the lines of, the busier he is, the more he meditates. And I feel that what you've just expressed is really making that clear, is that give yourself the space to be, and then you're more efficient when you're doing. I love that. Thank you so much. So, having said all of that, for those that are getting curious, that are interested in testing out or playing with some ideas of spirituality and how it might work for them, do you have any advice for people ready to say yes to this?
Well, I suppose it's a bit like, I mean, because everyone's an individual and no one diet fits one body, and you have to really adapt the practice to the person, then my advice is just to go and experiment and to try different practices, different teachers, different guides, and don't walk in blindly and expect that that's it. Quite often, obviously, you'll probably be introduced by a friend who you trust, and because you need to establish that relationship of trust, I think, before you can start developing a little bit of faith in the practice, because it requires faith, because it's not tangible, because you don't see the results on your body, or they're not so, immediate. You need to have a lot of trust, and so to hand yourself over blindly, question it. Don't do that. Just question the practice, sit with it, try it on, apply it, and then the true gauge of whether it's your philosophy or not is how it supports you in times of need. And that, to me, is the true test of how supportive a philosophy is. And that'll be different for everybody. So really, life's just one giant experiment, really, isn't it? Like, if we knew it, we'd all be doing it. So just go and try it on for size and make it fun. That's the point. It's not meant to be a struggle of searching and grasping. It's already there within you. Don't forget that. This is an aspect we all have in us, just as much as the physical, the mental, or the pranic. So it's about opening what's within instead of trying to struggle with finding something outside of ourselves.
Oh, I love that. I actually think that's one of the words I connect with a lot when you're teaching as well, is that you say just experiment, just, see how it feels. And just that giving yourself permission that you don't have to have all the answers in this sort of seeking internal thing is wonderful. Thank you. So I just wanted to ask you, if anybody is interested in finding out more about you, about what you do, can you share with us how they can find you?
You just Google Baxter, I think, to start, and you'll probably come up with a whole list of things. If you're in Victoria and it's more of a face-to-face thing, I'm here in Sorrento now. This year we're staying put, actually, because I'm getting married. So we're going to stay in Australia this year and grow some roots and all that sort of thing, like vegetables in the garden. In this garden here, we're going to get married in.
Yay! Congratulations! I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm here in Sorrento. I also travel up to Melbourne. I think you mentioned that we're launching an intelligent health program this year, which is a really interesting collaboration between a local naturopath and Chinese practitioner here, who are both, well esteemed in their own right, and neither of them need more work. But it's something that we recognize is required, because when people come to see us, rarely do they walk away and actually do. And so we find that people need more support. So the three of us have joined together and to offer that. And so that's what I'm focusing on this year. If you're not, in Victoria, then I run tours. I like to sort of work with groups already established, like on a fun girls tour, or I can take you to Bali or Kashmir trekking, or across to New Mexico and have some fun yoga type of trips there. And otherwise, on the app, the breathtaking app is out there, and not only for hypertension, but it's designed, they're just breathing practices designed to lower hyper conditions like insomnia, anxiety, anything that you need a calm mind for. And they're all local sounds. So I've had a friend blow the didge, and we have the sound of the she oaks that you might be able to hear now, sounds of Australian desert, and that combines with my voice to guide you through. And you can record, you can measure your heart rate or your blood pressure before and after the breathing practice to see the effect it's had on yourself. So you can use yourself as a science lab and don't have to worry about what the rest of science says about any of this. You can see for yourself, and then we have stats where we record that data, and then you can export that off to your doctor if you'd like to co-manage your condition like blood pressure. So it's a clever little app. It's free, and so that's accessible to everyone.
Amazing. Thank you. And I will put all of those links below the video when this goes up. So thank you so much for joining me. I've really appreciated having you here and hearing your story.
Great, Jo. Thank you very much, and well done on putting this together. It's a great initiative, and there's lots of people out there, I'm sure, with wonderful stories to share and hopefully inspire people to experiment with their own lives and own spirituality and own physicality and minds.
Amazing. Thank you. Bye now.
Great. Thanks, Jo.